Hello and welcome to this CLV Betting Academy bracket breakdown and analysis. My name is Tyler. I'm the lead analyst here for CLV Betting Academy. And I'm going to be going through the bracket and giving our official picks along with analysis. This will be a longer video because I will be breaking down each matchup to an extent. And if there will be one coming out later, that is just the picks essentially if you just want that. But offering the analysis that goes behind it in this particular video just to allow people to learn and hopefully it impacts their bracket in a positive way. So, filling this out on Tournament Challenge, we will have a group out for everybody trying to figure out a small prize that we'll have for the winner. It'll be free entry, just something to get everybody together to compete in one sort of group or challenge. Regardless, now starting for the actual bracket, as you can see, already selected Auburn here. No analysis needed here, right? I don't think anyone's going to be taking Auburn to lose, and I'm just going to go through that one. Now, the first game is going to be Louisville. Now, I've already gone through most of these, but want to show the thought process that goes behind them as well, just to give everybody as much insight as possible. So that's going to be Friday's games. We want Thursday's games. So where is it? Here we go. So you can already see Bart has that as Louisville minus 3.5. The spread is minus 2.5 at the time of recording. And if this loads, all right. So I'm leaning towards Louisville already. I've already kind of gone through the analysis for a lot of these, but going to explain to you guys what I am looking at here. So one thing, Louisville dominates the turnover battle. Free throw line, Creighton does not get the free throw line, and there's really nitpicking things. But the big thing is Creighton has really fallen off halfway through the year. They're not as effective outside of Ashworth and Kalkbrenner. Louisville has athletes that will be able to space the floor and put Kalkbrenner in space, right? One big thing is that Creighton is able to defend the rim. However, Louisville is going to get Kalkbrenner out of the paint and really be able to space them out and light them up. So going with Louisville there, that'll be an interesting matchup. We're going to go region by region here. Louisville Auburn will be an interesting matchup, especially with that being a home game essentially for Louisville. That's going to be in Kentucky. Another reason why I also like Louisville against Creighton there, just because again, home game for Kentucky. Now, this is an interesting game right here. Michigan, UC San Diego. You're seeing a ton of people that are leaning towards UC San Diego. We've been calling this on our page, if you've been following us, that UC San Diego is going to be the favorite upset, basically to take in March, right along there with McNeese State. And then once the bracket came out, Michigan, being fraudulent, has sort of gone mainstream, if you want to call it like that. They turn the ball over way too much, and they've won way too many close games. Now you can see a big thing here is UC San Diego and Michigan. The turnover discrepancy is incredible here. With that being said, I'm leaning towards going to Michigan or picking Michigan in this game. A big thing is UC San Diego has picked apart Big West teams, right? It's a different level. Bring it to the Big Ten. I think people are overestimating how well that San Diego is going to be able to turn over these teams. Now, as you can see here, looking at their schedule, I mean, who's the best opponent that they've played? That is UC San Diego. Utah State, I guess. And they beat Utah State, but Utah State's fraudulent in my opinion. So Utah State's their best win, right? And it's not anything a knock against UC San Diego because a lot of these good teams don't want to schedule good mid-majors earlier in the year because there's not much upside for them really, only downside to get knocked off. And so their turnover numbers I think are slightly inflated based off of who they've played. I really do actually kind of like Michigan. We took Michigan in the Big Ten championship game +4 and that won, obviously. But I am going Michigan here. Now, if you thought we were going to have an upset there, it's coming with Yale. Now we're going to get into that game right here. A&M has been a team I've been fading on the back half of the year, and this is the nightmare scenario for Texas A&M. This is the 1-13 seed that you really did not want to see if you were an Aggie fan, and here's why. So A&M, they are incredibly inefficient shooting the ball. The reason why they win is because they win the shot volume game, right? And what I mean by that is they might only shoot 30%, but if they're getting 20 rebounds, you're going to get more points just through more attempts. And that's huge. The number one team, offensive rebounding team. Now, the reason why this hurts them is because Yale is a great defensive rebounding team. So they're going to be able to limit the offensive rebounds for Texas A&M. Yale is going to protect the ball, which is another way that A&M generates their offense is through turning teams over, right? They're a chaotic team. The ball's going everywhere. Yale is way more calm and not going to give them those easy run-out opportunities. And then Yale can get hot from three. John Poulikitis is a great shooter. Bez Mbang is going to lock down Wade Taylor, hopefully. And it's really just a nightmare scenario for Texas A&M. And so that is our first pick. It is going to be Yale to, or first upset is going to be Yale to survive that game. Now, this is a tough one because we don't necessarily know who is playing. And so, regardless, I don't have any of these teams going far. I do have Iowa State getting out there. And we can dive into Iowa State right now, just before we skip over that. But Iowa State Lipscomb, there's some concerns because of who Iowa State lost their best player. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's not playing. He's out for the tournament. They are getting one guy back. They did not have for the Big 12 tournament. Taman Lipsey, I believe, was his name. But looking at here, Iowa State real quick, we'll go through this one. Where is this? Oh, that's a Friday game. That's why. Sorry. Going through regions, some games aren't going to be on Thursday. Iowa State. Okay. So Lipscomb is a great shooting team, but they're not as athletic, and the athleticism on the floor is really going to separate these two teams. So if you're going to look at taking a 3 seed to lose, I would look elsewhere. We'll dive into one that I'm not necessarily going to pick because I don't think it's going to happen, but there's upside for it to happen, if that makes sense. Yeah. So there's really no angle here to take Lipscomb, right? They do a couple things well, but nothing well enough to the extreme. That is also a detriment of Iowa State. There's just nothing here, right? There's no angle to really exploit, like how Yale could mitigate whatever Texas A&M does, blah, 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 doing things like that. Everything's about neutral here from this perspective, and Iowa State's going to move on. From this game, again, this is tough. I like San Diego State if they were going to win their first game against UNC, so this will be kind of a toss-up. But as of now, I'm going to take San Diego State, just their ability to turn the ball over. I'm not as high on Ole Miss as I was in the beginning of the year. And so I'm going with San Diego State there. However, that is something that could still change based off of who ends up winning that game, actually. So, next game, Marquette, New Mexico, which will be a Friday game. So this is a tough one. I was looking to buy low on Marquette. However, this will be a tough matchup for them. New Mexico can kind of match Marquette's guard play. Right, you can see here, both teams are going to value possessions, right, generating them and protecting them. This section right here, that middle turnover section. Now, Marquette has been fading. They've been slightly banged up, and they have a really short rotation. New Mexico is going to speed this game up, keep it at a higher tempo, and they have the guard play to be able to keep up with Cam Jones and the rest of the guys on Marquette. Shaka Smart does not also have a great record in March. He has a lot of early exits. I believe I heard something on the radio about him having 6 first-round exits, and he's also had some in that first weekend as well. So he's famous for his run with VCU to the Final Four. However, beyond that, he has been very lackluster. I'm going to be going with New Mexico here. Now, I know a big thing is about the Mountain West and how they haven't performed well. However, that I think is just a variance thing. And yes, they haven't done well, but there's no magnitude really behind it. And I think New Mexico is really going to be able to keep up with Marquette here. Okay, and then Michigan State. Bryant's a great team, but I don't see anything really with Michigan State to be threatened by with Bryant. Okay, so now I've gone through the rest of the bracket. Now, because Bart Torvik only has the upcoming games breakdowns, it's a little harder to be able to compare the metrics of two different teams, and so I didn't want to waste my time waste your time while loading these things. So went through and filled out the rest of the region, and now I will kind of break down each one for you guys. First thing with Auburn. Now, it's an interesting one, considering taking Louisville over Auburn because they're at home, but I do think Auburn is on another level, especially coming off of an embarrassing-ish loss in the SEC tournament. They've lost 3 of their last 4. There's a lot of concerns around them, and I do think that this Auburn team is a very alligator-like team where they eat and they do well and they get fat and happy, and then that's when they lose. Right now they're starving. They haven't been done well recently, and so I don't see them getting knocked off by Louisville, especially in Kentucky is interesting, but not happening in my mind. Michigan-Yale will be an interesting game. I really was considering taking Yale here because I do think Michigan is fraudulent. However, Yale does not turn people over like I would want them to. They've bad turnover numbers, and that is, again, in the Ivy League as well. We just discussed how UC San Diego has great turnover numbers, but it's against poor competition. Same thing with Yale, and they don't even turn it over well. So I think Michigan's going to squeak by there and then ultimately get annihilated by Auburn. Iowa State over San Diego State is what I'm basically assuming is going to be San Diego State right there. Again, I think there's just 2 different levels to those teams. And even though Iowa State is missing one of their top guys, it's just a whole different ballgame. And New Mexico, Michigan State could be an interesting game, but I think the depth of Michigan State is really what helps them here. New Mexico is more somewhat top heavy, and so that could be a closer game, but I just ultimately don't see it getting to a point where New Mexico beats Michigan State. Now, looking at the next round, again, like I said, Michigan is fraudulent, and it's kind of I've struggled to take them to the Sweet 16, but this is ultimately where I see them getting axed off in a game that's not even close. Iowa State, it's tough at this point because both these two teams, Iowa State and Michigan State, are great analytically. Right now, Iowa State's 8 in Bartorvik, where Michigan State is 13th. But Michigan State's shooting is poor. They can go on offensive cold stretches. I really think is what's going to hurt them against the elite competition. I think the Big Ten is actually somewhat weaker than what some people imagine, and they might be getting how it might be getting represented in the metrics. And so I think that really comes out to show against these elite teams, and that's where you're going to get Iowa State, and then ultimately Auburn to the Final Four, which is a chalky pick. I promise you this video is not going to be chalky because I do actually disagree with a lot of people. I don't like Auburn, to be honest with you, long term. And depending on who comes out of that bracket, I don't think I'll have them get into the championship because I do have some flaws with Chad Baker Mazzara, and Johnny Broome might not be entirely healthy. But because Iowa State is missing one of their best players, if not the best player, I don't see them getting to the Final Four here. Although getting to Elite Eight is where I ultimately project them. So next, we're going to be getting into the East region. Now, Duke, not even waste your time here with this. This is an interesting matchup between Mississippi State and Baylor. It is favored by Bart by only a point, which is interesting because the market actually has Mississippi State favored. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this Mississippi State team. If you've been following me throughout the year, I've given out plays with them, and they have not done particularly well, even with great closing line value. So you can see this middle of the road regression projected for both teams. This tool isn't as effective during tournament time just because a lot of the winning teams will have negative regression because of how many times that they've won, and so the tool isn't as effective, but it could help you find maybe a team that really lucked into a run, whatever it might be. It's more effective for probably high major teams that are due for regression rather than low major teams that won their tournament, and because most of those teams will have projected regression, negative regression as well. So looking at this matchup, it is really relatively even here. The big thing with this Mississippi State team is they can't shoot outside of Josh Hubbard, their best player, and they really can't score outside of him as well. And so I really don't like either of these teams, to be honest with you. Baylor takes way too many mid-range shots, and I'm surprised they're 58th in defensive efficiency. They really can't guard at times. But I think the three-point defense from Mississippi State, as well as their lack of scoring ability, is really what's going to do them in here. And Baylor has some upside because they've been dealing with injuries. But big thing is these rows right here. They can't shoot. They're going to give up a lot of good looks, and they give them up at a high rate. That's enough to do you in against a Baylor team that takes them at a decent amount rate and makes them at a decent amount rate. I'm going to be taking Baylor here in this game, and that will probably be something that we also advise to picks-wise. But you'll be seeing that separately. Okay, so Baylor there. Oregon Liberty is also another interesting one. I don't think Liberty's as popular as an upset as some people might have had them, or as some people might have said for other 12 seeds. However, for this one, I'm leaning towards Oregon already. I do want to run through the metrics with you guys real quick. Yeah, I mean, Liberty does grade out great metrics-wise. This is more of a pick. Bart has this as a 2-point spread, and the market has it at 6, so there's kind of a discrepancy. This is one of those things where Liberty grades out great analytically, but it's probably because of the type of competition they've played against. These analytic systems, you can kind of game the actual system by playing bad teams and just beating the hell out of them. And that's kind of what Liberty's done to be able to get up to 56th in Bartorvik. It's crazy that there's only 17 rank difference between these teams. But Oregon has a lot of top-end talent, and Dana Altman is a great coach in March, so I am not worried about them getting knocked off by Liberty. Arizona Akron. Now, this is a very interesting game. Very interesting. So this is going to be a 4 seed that I don't think a lot of people are expecting to get upset, and I'm not going to take them either because I don't think they're going to lose, but there could be a scare here, right? And so if you're in a pool that gives you extra points for picking a dog and the seed difference matters, this could be a pick you want to look at. And the big thing here is just the variance, right? Akron takes a ton of threes and they make them at a really great rate. Now, the downside is they probably are not going to be able to match up with Arizona size-wise, right? They're 135th in defensive rebounding and actually good on the offensive glass, but that is, again, probably saturated by MAC competition. I don't remember Akron really playing many top-end teams, if any at all. I think Arizona's size really could pull that away, but because of the three-point shooting variance, Akron is something to look at and something that we're looking at of maybe offering a play on the spread. But as of now, there's nothing. From a betting perspective, you could also take a look at the over. These teams are going to play wicked fast. However, the total is very high, so that's going to be something that needs more in-depth analysis there. But going to be taking Arizona there to take care of business. Now, this is a game where if you're following us, you see that VCU, we've already given it out. I really like VCU in that spot. And we can go over why. Now, the one downside to this is VCU having to go to altitude. They're playing in Denver, which is a plus for BYU because they live in altitude, so it's not really an effect on them playing in Denver. VCU just had a couple games in a couple days, lasting till Sunday. Now they have to fly out and play early Thursday afternoon in Denver. It's a lot of travel for them, so that is one downside, which doesn't make this like an amazing play that I love. But they match up really well with BYU, and that's why I like them in this first round matchup. The big thing is the turnovers. VCU turns you over. That's what they do. BYU does not handle the ball well, and I think you're really going to get VCU winning the possession battle with those turnovers. Now, one thing that kind of limits VCU's upside is they really rely on the offensive glass, as you can see right there, and BYU does rebound well. So that's something that will be negated. However, the other thing that I'm looking at too is how VCU will be able to neutralize BYU on the offensive side, right? BYU is a high volume three-point shooting and making team. VCU is going to limit how many threes they take as well as how many threes they make to really muck this game up. And I think it's going to be very close and really 50-50 matchup. And what's going to tip it in the scale for VCU is going to be just the extra turnovers that they're able to generate, essentially. So VCU in that round. Wisconsin over Montana. However, again, if you follow us, you've seen that I've already given out Montana plus 17.5 was the line when I gave it out. It's 16.5 now. That is a really tough spot. It's a really tough spot for Wisconsin. They, similar to VCU, just finished on Sunday. They played 4 games in 4 days and now have to go to altitude in Denver. Now, the big thing with Wisconsin is they played one extra game more than VCU, and it showed in their game, right? Now, VCU didn't play great on Sunday either, but Wisconsin, their legs gave out, right? And so I think having to go to Denver against a team in Montana who I'm not sure exactly what the elevation is in Montana, but it's probably adjusted closer towards Denver than Wisconsin would be. It's just a tough travel matchup after an extensive tournament, grueling tournament that really you could tell exhausted their guys. But then the next thing you look at is these teams are actually somewhat similar in how they play, right? So Montana's going to take care of the ball, similar to Wisconsin, but they're not going to generate many turnovers. Wisconsin doesn't either. Now the big thing here is the difference on the offensive glass to defensive, right? That's going to be more possessions for Wisconsin. But again, that's for the plus 17. That's a wide enough margin to take Montana, right? For just picking who's going to win, I'm taking Wisconsin here. But just diving into why this is such an interesting matchup. Montana, great offensively from 2, can really shoot it from 3. And so it really, they're very similar teams, right? Obviously Wisconsin's better, but there's nothing that Wisconsin's really going to be able to exploit here. The 2-point percentage, again, this is a problem. Wisconsin should go what they want at the rim, but not to an extent where they cover the spread. But again, this is going to be picking teams straight up. So we're going with Wisconsin, but if you're looking for a 3 seed to potentially go down, that is I would say number 1 team, where if you're going to pick a 3 seed to go down, that's where you go. This next matchup, again, I've already taken a look at this. I love St. Mary's here, and we can dive into this. Now, this is really going to be a comparison of the Vanderbilt coach hasn't really done it in March, whereas the St. Mary's coach, he's played it in a ton of games in March. They've gone on runs, won a couple games, and so I think experience really matters here, but then also the type of, this game's on Friday, the type of defense that St. Mary's play is really going to be what separates them. I think that they really get undervalued because of the lack of media coverage and how Gonzaga dominates the WCC, and the St. Mary's team, especially this year, beat Gonzaga down twice. And then that third game they lost in the WCC championship was just, I think it was both teams shot 1 of 25 from 3. So it was just embarrassing on both fronts. So I would count that as a wash. But a big thing here is just St. Mary's going to win the rebound battle. They're going to suffocate them from 2, from getting to the rim. And they're going to be able to stop them from 3. Really, Vanderbilt is not too big of a threat from 3, but they're trying to attack on the inside, trying to turn you over, which St. Mary's is going to value possessions. Now, they don't generate turnovers as much, which is surprising given how well they grade out from a defensive efficiency perspective, but that's just off of a shot quality perspective is why they grade out so defensively, because they generate extremely difficult shots. And so this is just something where, while St. Mary's isn't great offensively, they're going to be able to do enough and really, I think, squeeze Vanderbilt out to where this is a game that I'm looking to back on the spread as well. It looks like it's actually getting steamed down, so we could be getting an even better number with St. Mary's. But if that were to get to like a 3, that's going to get played from our end. But yeah, so St. Mary's from that perspective right there. And then Alabama, not even going to waste your time. Robert Morris has had a great year, but they're not going to beat Alabama. Okay, so now we'll be back with this filled out region, and we can go through the rest. All right, so now we have the East region filled out, and now you can see that there is a little bit more chaos than what we had in the South region. So going to go through each of those games now. So Duke-Baylor is an interesting matchup because you have Baylor with Jeremy Roach, old Duke player, going up against each other, but Duke should have no problems there. Baylor doesn't have the size really to match them in the front court. Now, Cooper Flagg's health is somewhat uncertain, so that it doesn't give Duke as big of an advantage, but they have other guys who can get down there and really play. And Baylor could win that game if they hit a million threes, but that's really going to be their path to victory, not something that is likely to happen. And so I'm going to be staying away from that. Between Oregon and Arizona, there really isn't one thing to exploit over the other in terms of like how they play, but Oregon is somewhat thin on the front court with Nate Biddle. If he gets in foul trouble, they could be in trouble. And Arizona really just, I think, will be able to compete down low with him and probably take advantage of that and get him in trouble. The Oregon team is fine. They have great players, but I don't think it meshes as well as one would hope to really elevate them to the next level and be able to contend with a team like Arizona in the Big 12. So I have Arizona winning that game. The next matchup, VCU over Wisconsin. Now the reason being really is I'm not as big of a fan with Wisconsin. I think VCU can match them athletically. Now Wisconsin does value possession, so it'll be interesting on that front. They should also be able to keep VCU off the glass, but that is just something where I think the physicality of VCU should ultimately be able to overpower Wisconsin and really wear them down. But again, that game is going to be a toss-up. I could really see it going either way, and it depends on who's hitting shots. And that's where I think you see Wisconsin not making their shots similar to Michigan, just because of all these games, many days in the travel, really take an impact on them, right? And now VCU has similar travel. They had one less game in their conference tournament, but they don't rely on their shot-making abilities similar to Wisconsin and how they play. And so that's why I think VCU is going to be able to win that one in an ugly game. Now, looking at the bottom, even more carnage, is going to be St. Mary's over Alabama. This game is a extreme contrast in styles and it's going to lead to a lot of variance, right? Alabama is just going to try and run up and down as quickly as they can. St. Mary's is going to park the bus and really try and make it ugly. And the contrast of styles really makes this matchup interesting. And because St. Mary's, I really do think they're going to be able to guard the perimeter on Alabama. They should be able to limit shots. It gives them a great chance to win and knock them off. And Alabama is so reliant on that three-point shot. They aren't as great at shooting, right? Outside of a handful of guys, the whole team shoots threes at a very high rate, but only a couple of them make them at a high rate, which makes them very vulnerable against a very good defensive team like St. Mary's. That's going to make it extremely difficult to make shots on the perimeter. I've also heard things about Grant Nelson might not be totally healthy. And so it really all balls up into this lean towards St. Mary's, right? Bama does also have kind of some defensive flaws as well. So I'm going to be taking St. Mary's in this matchup. Now looking at the top, Duke, Arizona. I've been looking or hoping to get a good team to fade Duke earlier. Everyone's in love with them, and for good reason, but I think there's a couple question marks with them, and this is the great spot to take them. One, Arizona's already beat them. Now the whole revenge, whatever narrative of, Duke lost to Arizona, so they want to pay it back to them, I think that's garbage. I think if a team has showed you a path to beating a team, it's more replicable, and Arizona's done it already, right? Cooper Flagg is somewhat banged up, right? He would be probably healthier at this time, but ankles don't really, like ankle injuries, which is what he had, don't really entirely go away until you have an extensive off period. So he's not going to be 100%. Now, his 90% is still amazing, but it's not the same Duke team that people are projecting out. Brown, another great player, especially defensively for Duke, he's going to be out. It sounds like for the whole tournament, especially at this point, he should be out too. And Duke really hasn't played a ton of close games. Now, if you remember against Arizona, when they did play him, they had a couple bad turnovers, right? And so this Duke team is very young, and they haven't had a ton of close games, and they're not going to be able to handle that pressure, in my opinion, as efficiently as other teams might be able to because they're young, because they really didn't get tested at all in the ACC. They had a handful of close games, but a ton of those games where you walk in, win by 40, and walk out, it's just a different level of pressure, especially in March. And so I ultimately see that as Arizona getting by Duke. And then in this semifinal, this is where I think St. Mary's lack of offense really catches up to them, and Arizona is able to pull away. But again, this game would really be a toss-up. However, I think Arizona's ability to get inside and rebound will be able to limit St. Mary's advantage on the glass rebounding wise, and they shouldn't be as hurt by the St. Mary's defense from three because Arizona's not as reliant on the three-pointer like a team like Alabama could. Oh, sorry, and VCU St. Mary's. That's also an interesting matchup. However, St. Mary's will value possessions, keep VCU off the glass, and ultimately, I think the discipline and how they play, being very slow, kind of removes the chaos that VCU creates when they play, and going to give St. Mary's the edge. So now going on to the West region, we can fill in Florida pretty easily. This UConn game will be very interesting. UConn's a very interesting team. They have extremely high upside and a very low downside as well. They're extremely volatile just because you don't know what you're going to get, right? They're a top offensive team analytically, but they are horrible on defense, and so it really leaves a lot of upside if they were to get hot, but then also a lot of downside if they're not going to be hot. Okay, so Bart has this closer to a pick'em, -1.5, where the actual line, I believe, is around like 4.5 right now, which is interesting. I don't like Oklahoma, and I do think a ton of people are going to be taking UConn. It is an interesting matchup. I don't like Oklahoma in general, but looking at this right now, Oklahoma should be able to get to the line a ton because UConn's going to foul them, and they're just naturally great at creating free throws. However, UConn should be able to blow Oklahoma up on the glass. Oklahoma can really shoot it and take advantage of that three-point defense. Now, one problem that UConn has had is that they can't guard anyone on the perimeter from three especially. And they've also had turnover problems as well. It's not reflected in the metrics, but they've had times when they have really struggled to take care of the ball. Yeah, so this is an interesting one. You could really go either way with this. I'm going to be going, let's see. Actually, Oklahoma is horrible, 2-point defense. Yeah, this really is closer to a toss-up. I don't love this game, but this UConn team is not what we thought they were. They lose games that they shouldn't, and they're going to be a very popular pick to probably go on a run. However, I'm staying away from it. You see this every year, really, where you're going to have an 8 seed or a 9 seed that's very popular to knock off the 1, and I think this is going to be the most popular 8 seed to beat a 1, or to get picked to beat a 1. I don't think it's actually going to happen, and the reason being is I think Oklahoma is going to win this game against UConn. Should be right here. Memphis, Colorado. So this is a very interesting game just based off of the fact that Tyrese Hunter is not going to be playing for Memphis. And so Colorado State is on Friday. Colorado State is actually favored -2.5, although I'm not sure if I really agree with that even without Tyrese Hunter. It's interesting that Colorado State is -3.5 on Bart, and that's projecting Tyrese Hunter in from what I understand. Yeah, so this is an interesting matchup. So Memphis, their metrics aren't as good as what they should be because Memphis, like, just being honest, does not care about a ton of the games that they play. If you watch them in American, we faded them a ton this year, not because they're a bad team, but because there are just some games that they were so much better than the other team that it really doesn't matter to them. The game's meaningless. Like going to play in the Maui, right? And you're beating teams like UConn. I think they eventually got to the championship against Auburn. They beat, I think, Michigan State in the semis. I can't remember, but they got to the championship. And then you're now playing at Rice with 100 people there. Or at Tulsa or whoever they're playing. It's just not the same, and you don't get the same effort. And Penny isn't a great coach, and so I don't think he really gets the most out of his guys. I'm not even sure if he really cares until it's a big game that really matters. And this is going to be where they actually care, right? And so how you beat Memphis on the glass or on the glass defensively, they don't rebound the ball defensively well. Colorado State does not do that. You got to turn Memphis over. Colorado State again really does not do that. And then another thing to consider here is Colorado State's coach Nico Medved is basically going to take the Minnesota job as soon as this season's done. The portal's opened already. Teams are recruiting. Yeah, maybe he's not fully recruiting, but he is 1 foot out the door. This is like his dream job. I've heard he grew up in Minnesota, all this. And so I really do think that this 1 foot out the door, because the whole team knows he's leaving, and not that they're going to hold it against him, but they're all going to be hopping in the portal as well, most likely, to get their bags. And so it's just a team that has already accomplished everything. They won the Mountain West. They've done it all. Yes, winning the tournament on top of it is nice, but I don't necessarily know if everything's all there. And I think you're really undervaluing Memphis and who they are as a team. That's going to be a game that Memphis wins. I have Maryland in that game as well. As anyone that follows us knows, as a group, we've loved Maryland since the beginning of the year, have actually a long shot future on them. And in this game against Grand Canyon, I don't think they'll have any problems. Now, Grand Canyon is a great team, especially with Grant Foster. However, they just really haven't put it together like you'd expect. And so Maryland's going to be able to take care of business here. Yeah, like Grand Canyon, even though playing horrible WAC competition, they really have not been great on the offensive side. Don't shoot it well. I've seen all their percentages are lower than last year in terms of like 3-point shooting percentage. They don't shoot them at a high rate. It's just not an efficient team, and I don't think the athleticism that Grand Canyon has really poses any problems for Maryland, really at all. Okay, so this is another game that is a popular upset pick for everybody. I am not a fan of this Drake team, and while I don't like the Missouri coach, I do think that this is going to be a game that Missouri will ultimately be able to win. Drake has been very fortunate with variance, and they've gone overtime a ton of times in the MVC, and they all won them, which is a testament to who they are as a team. But then it also, overtime really in itself is a variance-filled period where anything can really happen. And I think they've been very fortunate because of it. I'm not as high on this team. It really revolves around Sturtz. Yeah, Bennett Sturtz, who you can see is the most valuable player on this team by far, and everybody else is just kind of a supplemental role where I think Missouri is able to distribute who does what more efficiently. And I do like a couple of guys on that team as well. Now, one thing that is really going to bother Drake here is the turnovers. You can see Missouri should be able to turn them over. And while Drake could get on the offensive glass here, it's not something I'm as worried about, just because, again, they're rebounding on MVC competition, who, if you know the MVC, the top teams like Belmont and Illinois State, the teams like that, are less athletic and great shooters, and so I think their rebounding numbers are somewhat inflated. Yeah, and then looking at this number right here, Missouri should be able to get what they want from Drake on the inside. Again, Drake isn't as big of a team. You can see right here, not a single guy over 6'10". And while Missouri isn't huge, they are just a larger team in general and should be able to get what they want at the rim. So I'm not going to be taking the popular Drake pick like everybody else might be. Texas Tech should be able to take care of business here. Not even going to waste your time with this one. I really do like Texas Tech in this region, and they should be fully healthy, which will be an interesting matchup. Kansas, Arkansas. Now this could really see this going either way. If Kansas can really guard the ball, Arkansas is going to be getting Boogie Flan back from what I've heard. And so Kansas is just so volatile, but Arkansas is just as volatile. And yes, they are getting Boogie Flan back, but I really have not liked what I've seen from them. Adu Thiero, I think, should be playing. But if he is, he'll be somewhat banged up, playing not 100%. And without him, he's a huge piece as well. I'm not high on this Arkansas team. Kansas has been disappointing, but I do like them over Arkansas. And then St. John's over Kansas. Or sorry, St. John's over Omaha is easy shoo-in. I think Omaha was... They did win the Summit League, however, probably not the best team in the Summit League. Okay, so now I'll come back with the filled-in region. All right, so region is filled in. Starting with Florida and Oklahoma. Don't really see any reason why to take Oklahoma there. Should take care of business easily. Maryland over Memphis. Again, Memphis, like we talked about, a minute ago, is shorthanded, and so Maryland's just a much more well-rounded team and should be able to take care of them. Texas Tech, I'm not a fan of Missouri. Don't like their coach. Think they're kind of overinflated, and so I think Texas Tech handles that one very easily. And then the one upset in this round of this region is going to be Kansas over St. John's. Now, I'm not high on St. John's, and these teams actually are very similar profiles. Great defensively and not as great offensively. And so the real difference here is that Kansas was in the Big 12, and I think the Big 12 is astronomically better than the Big East this year. I think you're going to see a lot of Big East teams really not do well. Like, so far, I mean, we've picked Creighton to lose, and we've picked Marquette to lose, and UConn, which is all like, what, that was 2, 3, and 5, right? So the top of the Big East, and in all reality, I don't believe they're that good. I don't think St. John's is as good as what people think they are, and this Kansas team actually is somewhat similar. It is tough just because Kansas was so much worse than what they should have been. They were the preseason #1. However, I think because of that, the hype of their demise always gets overblown, and this is a great bounce back opportunity for them. I just think they really match up well, and these are two extremely similar teams where it's going to be a coin flip game. And St. John's they've been asking for regression with how inefficient they are on offense. They take bad shots, they don't make threes, and is eventually going to come back to get them. I think this is really ultimately where you get them. And then between Texas Tech and Kansas, Big 12 rematch, Texas Tech I think is just a whole other level, and this is where the offensive woes of Kansas really come out to bite them. It doesn't hurt against St. John's because St. John's can't really score that well either, but Texas Tech can, and this is where they jump over. Now the big one that most people probably won't have is going to be Maryland over Florida. I think the market and public perception of Florida is inflated because of how well they played in the SEC tournament. However, this Maryland team, the last time that I looked, their best 5 grades out higher than any other 5 in the country. That's how it was. I can't remember exactly the date, but if they're not the top, they are in the top 5, if not top 1. And in March, when in a do or die game, those are the 5 that are going to be playing, right? They really don't get a lot of bench minutes, so foul trouble could be a problem. But Maryland, I really do think in a tournament setting like this is a team built to thrive just because they have that Iron 5 lineup like North Carolina did when they won on the run as an 8 seed, right? They didn't have any bench depth, but they kept the guys on the floor and they really did well from it. I think this is where you see that 5 really take over here and elevate Maryland over Florida. Now, with that being said, I think Texas Tech ultimately would take the cake over Maryland. This game, it was really tough going back and forth. There's really no way to knock the teams. However, even though depth wasn't a concern for this previous game, maybe it comes into play in Texas Tech. This is really tough, right? You get to a point where it's difficult to it's really difficult to differentiate these teams, but I'm going to be going with Texas Tech just because I do think the conference there in the Big 12 was better than the Big 10, and you might be seeing the difference take form there. But again, this is a really tough matchup. I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to go with Maryland over Texas Tech. So now we're going into the Midwest region. So you can start off with Houston very easily. Why don't we just go fill in Tennessee to save some time as well. Okay, so Gonzaga, Georgia. Gonzaga -4. Now Gonzaga really is a team that could go on a run. Similar to UConn, but not the same, right? There was high expectations for Gonzaga. They're coming as an 8 seed, probably going to be a popular pick to knock off the 1 here. And this matchup, I'm going to shoe in Gonzaga here. I do think they're going to take care of business, right? One problem is they have not be in the top level competition like they should have. However, I really do think they have the capability to. I like the players they have, Graham Ike and Nemhard especially, but they also have decent depth too. So I think this game with Georgia really not a problem. They're going to keep Georgia off the offensive glass where they get a ton of their points, and I really do think that they'll be fine and get through this game really without a concern. Analytically, there really is no point to why Georgia should beat Gonzaga. Gonzaga should be able to take care of this one. So going with Gonzaga there. This is an interesting game, Clemson-McNeese. A ton of people have McNeese winning that game. I'm going to go out. I've already looked through this. Clemson is going to be the pick here. It's not necessarily an analytical-based thing, but more of this Clemson team is really underrated. Duke took the shine in the ACC. Now, the ACC has been very bad, but Clemson has wins over Kentucky. They beat Duke as well. and they've played very well, and they return a lot of guys who were on that Elite Eight team where they could have made it to the Final Four. And so there's no really avenue that I see for McNeese to beat Clemson. That's what this comes down to. A lot of people will like McNeese. McNeese is a very good team with a lot of high major guys that transfer down and a great coach, a manager going viral, which will probably make this pick a trendy upset as well behind UC San Diego. But there's really nothing that I see for Clemson to lose this game. I actually really do like them and think that they could go on a run here. Purdue High Point. Now, this is where I think you could be getting an upset here. This Purdue team has really been fraudulent, a very weird team. They are horrible at defending the two. With that being said, High Point really struggles to guard people as well, and so it's an interesting game. The spread is actually pretty high. It's already gotten steamed down. I'm going to be taking a look at that. We already do have 3 plays advised, so I don't want to go too overboard on Thursday. However, I think we will be adding High Point. But I really do actually like them to win this game against Purdue. One, like we said, I mean, Purdue can't guard at the rim. And the nice thing for High Point is that they actually can guard at the rim to an extent, right? They're not great, but they can guard a 3 a little bit, and Purdue can as well. But the High Point has a lot of depth and different looks they can throw at Purdue, and the thing with Purdue is they really rely on 2 guys to carry them. So when you're throwing fresh guys out there to limit those 2 guys in their scoring, then it drains them while just throwing fresh bodies out there and can really stop their defense or stop their offense. And so I'm going with High Point here. They have a lot of high major transfers as well. Going through it, Pettiford. I mean, Pettiford was a 5-star at going into Kansas, right? Now, obviously, he didn't perform like a 5-star, but having that kind of background, like, it shows that he's a great player, and he really is. Demarion Williams, I believe, is a Texas Tech guy. Just checking his profile real quick if it loads. Yeah, Texas Tech. So you have a lot of high major guys that have transferred down to High Point for whatever reason. Their athleticism is not of a typical mid-major team. They're really going to be able to give Purdue problems. I would actually say High Point is the more athletic team in this matchup, which is kind of surprising. And so I will be taking High Point to win that game against Purdue. This next one is tough. I'm really high in Illinois. That's a brutal first draw. You would much rather see probably a good mid-major rather than one of those 2 teams. However, all the 11 seeds are pretty decent this year. But yeah, I'm assuming Xavier is going to win that game, which is really tough for Illinois. But I still like Illinois in that game. Now, another 3 seed that I'm going to take, but with an asterisk, is Kentucky. Now, I think Kentucky is right behind Wisconsin in the odds of getting upset. I would put Wisconsin at the most likely to get upset based off of their travel situation. You could really just get a dud out of them in that first game. That you never know what happens. But Kentucky, matchup wise, there's an avenue for Troy to keep that one close. And you got to consider the narrative around Kentucky, right? They threw Cal out because of how bad he was, because of their early round exits. Mark Pope has not been great in the tournament as well. And so I think there is some added pressure already, even though he has not been in a tournament with Kentucky, to winning this game and showing, hey, I'm better than that old guy. And because of that, it could be an impact on the players, right? Fan bases like Kentucky, like Indiana, are very intense, and so it could impact players in a certain way. We've already seen it with Umar Ballo. You could be seeing it with some of these Kentucky players as well. Now, looking at this matchup, one way you could really take advantage of Troy is turn them over, and Kentucky doesn't do that, right? So that there's not a way where you could see Kentucky really just bludgeon them and destroy them, right? Now, Kentucky could shoot the lights out and really pull away here. But, I mean, Troy can guard to an extent, right? So Kentucky, yes, any given night they can hit a million threes. The bad thing with Troy is they could shoot themselves out of the game. They're very efficient with the shots they take, but they really don't make any of them, which is somewhat poor. But the reason why Troy has the upside here to win this is because of this 2-point percentage right here. So Troy's not going to be turning the ball over like they normally would because Kentucky doesn't generate those turnovers. And Troy should be able to get after them at the rim and really generate those opportunities there. It is concerning they might not be able to rebound as efficiently as they would, right? They rely on those 2-point shots because of those high amounts of second opportunities because they rebound on the offensive glass really well. It just creates the upside, right? I'm still going with Kentucky because I actually do like the team and like Mark Pope and the schemes that he runs. but just from a matchup perspective, this one is reasonable, and you're probably going to see a lot of people taking Troy spread, I would assume. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen too much of it, but this was, again, filmed on Monday, so who knows. But that's just a 3 where if you want to take a flyer on a team getting knocked off, I think Kentucky is absolutely the way to go there. UCLA, Utah State. Now, this will be an interesting one because I have really not given this one as much thought, so you'll see more of a live process. If I can actually find that game. There we go. Okay, so I would lean towards UCLA to start just because I'm not high on Utah State. I think they are somewhat fraudulent and really tailed off at the end of the year. They do not guard well defensively, but they shoot it well. The problem is that UCLA is a better defensive team. Now, they don't grade out as good as I would have thought they would out of a Mick Cronin team. Yeah, this really is an interesting matchup here. UCLA wasn't as great in the beginning of the year and turned their season around. Got bounced early in the Big Ten just because Wisconsin, in the Big Ten tournament, because Wisconsin got very hot from 3. I'm going to be going with UCLA here. It really is tough because of Utah State's more efficient. They can hit shots. But this metric, now this is shot quality, which we really haven't pulled out too much in this video, if at all. You know, you're projecting negative regression now. It used to be a lot higher before. Let's see, UCLA. Yeah, so it really isn't too much of a difference there. But when the margins are so thin, that's where I'm going to be leaning towards. I don't think this Utah State team is as good. UCLA should be able to out-physical them. Mick Cronin teams tend to be very physical. This team should be able to get it to a point where they can control this game defensively. I do think it'll be an ugly game, and I would not be comfortable laying 4.5 with UCLA. That's what their spread is. But I'm going to take them just on the money line just to win this game right here. Now I'll be back with the filled-out region. All right, now to finish off this region. As you can see, I did hint at Gonzaga potentially being picked over Houston. However, I just couldn't get there. I really do like this Houston team. I like their physicality. I think that could really be a problem with Gonzaga. Gonzaga did not handle St. Mary's well, and St. Mary's could out-physical them a little bit in those games, and Houston can do that to an utmost extreme. And so I decided not to take the upset. I think that'll be a popular one amongst people, but I really do like Houston to advance here and go far. Clemson, High Point. High Point is a great team, but I think Clemson really is being undervalued. They have a team that a lot of them have done it there, and they arguably are better than that Elite Eight team. Victor Locken is a great addition and arguably maybe better than PJ Hall in terms of how the team fits together. And so I like Clemson to get by High Point without a struggle. Now, Illinois over Kentucky. Again, Kentucky is this volatile team that it's not really built for sustainable March runs, really, unless they run hot from 3. And Illinois is also a volatile team, which makes it a very interesting matchup, but I've been very high on this Illinois team. I think their best 5 is better than the Kentucky best 5. And they have not really all put it together recently, right? At the beginning of the year they have, and they looked very good. And then they've had mono and the flu and things like that. And so I really think this Illinois team is being undervalued by many and going to win this game against Kentucky. And then Tennessee versus UCLA, very similar kind of ish matchup where the teams are built similarly, but Tennessee's just better. They do all the same things, but just slightly better than UCLA. So I'm taking Tennessee to beat UCLA. Houston Clemson, this is again an interesting matchup, but this Houston team can shoot it and really guard, and they're extremely physical and experienced. I have them over Clemson here, taking care of business. And then Tennessee over Illinois. This is a rematch of a game that Illinois won on a buzzer beater layup. Or sorry, Tennessee won on a buzzer beater layup. I could honestly see Illinois taking the cake here and beating Tennessee. However, this Tennessee team has looked different as of late. Normally, I'm not high on Tennessee. Rick Barnes' teams, they don't do well in the tournament. However, they have looked better offensively. Like Zakai Ziegler has been better on offense than he really ever has been, which is a huge thing because he used to be a defensive piece only and distribute well and do whatever, but not an offensive contributor. And he supports Chaz Lanier along with Igor. I can't remember his last name, but their offensive output has been better. And so I think the combination of that with their razor-tight defense is what's going to elevate them over Illinois. And then, again, these two teams are also very similar, very physical, but then Houston just has that edge that puts them above Tennessee. Now, for the Final Four. So Auburn, Texas Tech, Arizona, and Houston. I've already gone through and selected the winner of these games, as you can see right here. Ultimately, I have Houston edging out Arizona. It really is just a physicality thing. Like, this physicality that Houston plays with is unmatched compared to any other team you could possibly see, possibly prep for. And what makes them better than they have been in past years is that they can actually score the ball this year, right? They can actually shoot it this year, which is a relatively new thing for these types of Houston teams, and so I think that's what really elevates them. Now, looking on the left side, Texas Tech, I do have them over Auburn. Like I said, I'm not high on this Auburn team. I think they just got a good draw, and the teams that they played really won't challenge them as other teams in other regions could have, right? Iowa State really could have gave them a test if they were fully healthy, but they're missing their best player and have been relatively banged up, so you never know what's happening with Iowa State. So I think Auburn gets here to the Final Four, but then drops out afterwards, just because I think this Texas Tech team is really well-rounded and can compete with Auburn, and Chad Baker-Mazara could do something very stupid to cost them. Who knows? But I just don't like this Auburn team as high as other people do. I'm really low on them, actually, relative to other people, but still have them in the Final Four. And then ultimately, Texas and Houston. This is a toss-up. It will be interesting if this is two Texas teams being played in San Antonio. However, again, this Houston team, I think this is ultimately where they get crowned. Sampson has been knocking on the door with teams like this for a while, but this is the best team I think he's had in recent memory. And as long as they stay healthy, as long as Juwan Roberts should be okay. They're not sure on him right now for this first weekend, but I don't think they're going to have. They could have issues with Gonzaga. I think they're able to get through that to a point where he's healthy, and then once he's good, this Houston team really should be able to take over. Now, the Big 12 was magnificent this year, and Houston was minus 110 to win the Big 12 tournament, which really shows you in a great conference they dominated it. And yes, you could point to certain games where they didn't get everyone's best, right? Like Texas Tech, when they played them, for example, was injured. I really do believe in this Houston team. This path, while it is a tough path for them, that's how much I believe in them and not as much in the other teams. And ultimately, who I see cutting down the nets in March. So that is the video. I hope this was helpful and is able to guide your bracket making decision. Again, there will be a video that's a lot shorter. So if you made it to the end, I guess you don't need to watch that. But if you want to go back and review certain things, there will be a short video that comes through. But thank you for your support. We at CLV Betting Academy really appreciate all the engagement, likes, whatever it is, and hope that we're able to bring positive content that helped you guys win your March Madness pools, hopefully.